Hey friends, Mrs. Stevens here. We are going to be reading a Cinderella story today, and this is going to be a story from Egypt. It's called The Egyptian Cinderella. And I know that we just finished reading The Rough-Faced Girl, and that was a Cinderella story from a Native American tribe, okay, which is very cool. I love when we get to compare different stories, especially from different cultures. So when we're done reading, we're going to compare this story from Egypt to our traditional Cinderella story that we know about, okay? So that'll be when we're finished reading. Before we read, I wanted to take a little look at where Africa is. So, Egypt, but Egypt is in Africa. So this is the continent of Africa, okay? Here's Madagascar, that's part of Africa. And then right over here is where we have Egypt. So Egypt is a country that is on the continent of Africa, okay? So we know already, because we have learned a little bit about mummies, so I know that we've heard of Egypt. So here we know that mummies are in Egypt. They have pharaohs in Egypt, that would be like the king. And then we also have the pyramids, Great Pyramids. So we're going to actually listen to our story today, just to change things up a little bit. We're gonna listen, and I'm gonna pause it while the lady's reading and to ask you some questions. Okay, so the Egyptian Cinderella.
The Egyptian Cinderella. Written by Shirley Clemo and illustrated by Ruth Heller. Long ago, in the land of Egypt, where the green Nile River widens to meet the blue sea, there lived a maiden called Rhodopis. When she was still a small child, Rhodopis had been stolen by pirates. She was snatched from her home in Greece, taken across the sea to Egypt, and there sold as a slave. Like the Egyptian servant girls, Rhodopis went to the water's edge each day to wash clothes or to gather the reeds that grew along the riverbank. But Rhodopis looked different from the Egyptian girls. Their eyes were brown and hers were green. Their hair hung straight to their shoulders, while the breeze blew hers into tangles. Their skin glowed like copper, but her pale skin burned red beneath the sun. That's how she got her name, for Rhodopis meant rosy-cheeked in Greece. Rosy Rhodopis, scoffed the servant girls, hissing her name between their teeth. Rhodopis pretended not to hear, but she blushed rosier than ever.
Okay, so I want you to think, why are they making fun of her? It's terrible. They're making fun of her just because she looks different than they do. She's not from Egypt. She's originally from Greece. And there, blonde hair is more common. She has light skin and rosy cheeks, but not in Egypt. So she looks different than most Egyptians.
Although her master was kind, he was old and liked to doze beneath a fig tree. He seldom heard the servant girls tease Rhodopis. He never saw them ordering her about. "Hurry, Rhodopis," they would shout at her. "The geese are in the garden eating up the onions. Mend my robe. I'm hungry, Rhodopis, bake the bread." Rhodopis always hurried to do their bidding, for the Egyptian girls were household servants, and she was only a slave.
So what that means is that she can't really ask them to stop, because it's almost like they have a higher position than her. Okay, so if you think about when you work, everybody has a boss. So although the master is her real boss, okay, these girls are still a step higher than her because they are servants and she is a slave.
Rhodopis found friends among the animals instead. Birds ate crumbs from her hands. She coaxed a monkey to sit upon her shoulder and charmed a hippopotamus with her songs. It would raise its huge head from the muddy water and prick its small ears to listen. Sometimes, when her chores were done and the day had cooled, Rhodopis would dance for her animal companions. She twirled so lightly that her tiny bare feet scarcely touched the ground. One evening her master awakened to see her dance. "No goddess is more nimble," he called out. Such a gift deserves a reward. He tugged his chin whiskers, thinking, then declared, You shall go barefoot no longer. Her master ordered a pair of dainty slippers made especially for Rhodopes. The soles were of real leather, and the toes were gilded with rose-red gold. Now when Rhodopes danced, her feet sparkled like fireflies. The rose-red slippers set Rhodopes more apart than ever. The Egyptian servant girls were jealous, for they wore clumsy sandals woven from papyrus. Out of spite, they found new tasks for her to do, keeping Rhodope so busy that she was too tired to dance at night. One evening, Kippa, who was the chief among the servant girls, announced, Tomorrow we sail for Memphis to see the pharaoh. His Majesty is going to hold court for all his subjects. There will be musicians and dancing, said another servant girl, eyeing the rose-red slippers. There will be feasting, added a third. Poor Rhodopes, you must stay behind, Kippa jeered. You have linen to wash and grain to grind and the garden to weed.
So I know that the more I listen to this, the more similarities I see between this Cinderella story and our traditional Cinderella story. Okay, so they're going to go to meet the pharaoh, and they're going to go to court, which would be not like a court where we have a judge, but it's more like a party. And she does not get to go, just like Cinderella didn't.
The next morning, just as Ra the sun was climbing into the sky, Rhodopes followed the servant girls to the riverbank. Kippa wore a necklace of blue beads. Bracelets jingled on the wrists of the second. The third had tied a many-colored sash about her waist. Although Rhodopes wore a plain tunic, on her feet were the rose-red slippers. Perhaps they will let me come along to see the pharaoh after all, she thought. But the three servant girls pulled their raft around the bend in the river without giving Rhodopes a backwards glance. Rhodopes sighed and turned to the basket piled high with dirty clothes. Wash the linen, weed the garden, grind the grain. She slapped the wooden paddle against the cloth in time to her song. The hippopotamus, tired of so dull a tune, pushed out of the reeds and splashed into the river. Shame! Cried Rhodopes, shaking her paddle. You splattered mud on my beautiful slippers. She polished the shoes on the hem of her tunic until the rosy gold glittered in the sun. Then she carefully put them on the bank behind her. Wash the linen, weed the garden, Rhodopes began again, when suddenly a shadow fell on the water. Rhodopes jumped. A great falcon, the symbol of the god Horus, circled in the sky with wings spread so wide they blotched out the sun. Greetings to you, proud Horus, Rhodopes murmured. She bowed her head and felt a rush of air on the back of her neck.
Uh-oh, so I can see that she left them to dry on the bank, and it looks like the falcon is going to steal her slipper. But I am wondering why she still bowed her head to the bird. If we look back, it actually says that he, the great falcon, is a symbol of one of the gods that they worship. Just like they had the sun god, they had a god of Horus too, which I'm not quite sure what he was or who he was, but that's why she bowed her head to him.
When Rhodopes dared to lift her eyes, she saw the falcon soar away. Dangling from his talons was one of her beautiful slippers. Stop! She pleaded. Come back! But the bird did not heed her. He flew toward the sun until he was no more than a dark speck against the gold. Rhodopes bit her tongue. One shoe was worse than none at all. Now she'd have to dance like a stork, hopping about on one foot, and even the monkey would laugh. Rhodopes tucked the slipper into her tunic and returned to her laundry, salting the river with her tears. After Rhodopes had lost sight of the falcon, the mighty bird followed the course of the Nile to the city of Memphis, to the square where the pharaoh was holding court. There, the falcon watched and waited. The pharaoh's name was Amasis. On his head, he wore the red and white crown of the two Egypts. The double crown was heavy and pinched his ears. He preferred driving his chariot fast as the wind to sitting on the throne. Amasis yawned.
So if you think about it, he doesn't really seem to like going to all of these parties that he probably has often. He would rather be, well, riding in his chariot, which would be like his horse and carriage, and doing things other than wearing that heavy, uncomfortable crown.
At that very moment, the falcon dropped the rose-red slipper into his lap. The slipper was so bright that Amasis thought it was a scrap of the sun. Then he saw the falcon wheeling overhead. "The god Horus sends me a sign," exclaimed the pharaoh. He picked up the rose-red slipper. "Every maiden in Egypt must try this shoe. She whose foot it fits shall be my queen. That is the will of the gods." Amasis dismissed the court, called for his chariot, and began his search at once. When the Egyptian servant girls arrived in Memphis, they found the throne empty and the streets deserted. They were so angry on their return that even seeing Rhodopis without her rose-red slipper did not please them. "Slaves are better off barefoot," snapped Kippa. The pharaoh journeyed to distant cities. He tracked the desert where pyramids tower over the sand, and he climbed the steep cliffs where falcons nest. The rose-red slipper was always in his hand. Wherever he went, women and girls, rich or poor, flocked to try on the slipper, but none could fit into so small a shoe.
So do you think he's going to give up? He's searching and searching, and he still can't find the girl who fits in the slipper. I don't think he will, only because I know that in the original Cinderella, I shouldn't say original, in our traditional Cinderella story, I know that the prince doesn't give up. He does end up finding Cinderella.
The longer Amasis searched, the more determined he became to marry the maiden who had lost the tiny slipper. He summoned his royal barge and vowed to visit every landing along the Nile. The barge was hung with sails of silk. Trumpets blared and oarsmen rowed to the beat of gongs. The din was so dreadful that when the barge rounded the bend in the river, Rhodopis fled in alarm, but the servant girls ran to the water's edge. "Now we will see the pharaoh," cried Kippa. Amasis held up the rose-red slipper. "Whoever can wear this shoe shall be my queen." The servant girls knew that shoe, and they knew its owner too. Yet they clapped their hands over their mouths and said nothing. If one of them could wear it... First Kippa, then the others, tried to put on the slipper. Each crammed her foot and curled her toes and squeezed until tears ran down their cheeks. Still, her heel hung over. "Enough," said Amasis wearily. He would have set sail again had he not chanced to see Rhodopis peering through the rushes.
So I wonder why she didn't run up and say, "It's mine." I know I'm thinking maybe it's because she thought she would get in trouble. Remember, the servant girls are not very nice to her, and she probably didn't know what would happen if she did that. That's just my prediction. What do you think?
"Come," he commanded. "You must try this rose-red slipper." The servant girls gawked open-mouthed as the pharaoh kneeled before Rhodopis. He slipped the tiny shoe on her foot with ease. Then Rhodope pulled its mate from the folds of her tunic. "Behold," cried Amasis, "in all this land there is none so fit to be queen." "But Rhodopis is a slave," protested one of the servant girls. Kippa sniffed. "She's not even Egyptian." "She is the most Egyptian of all," the pharaoh declared, "for her eyes are as green as the Nile, her hair as feathery as papyrus, and her skin the pink of a lotus flower." The pharaoh led Rhodopis to the royal barge, and with every step, her rose-red slippers winked and sparkled in the sun.
So that's interesting that the servant girls said she's not even Egyptian, and the pharaoh said she's the most Egyptian of all. And he said that it was because her features that they were making fun of earlier were actually things that were prominent in Egypt. but I also think it probably had a lot to do with her character. We talk about character traits a lot, that she was kind, she wasn't bossy like the other girls. So I think it had a lot to do with that as well. All right, okay, so now that we've heard both stories, we're going to compare our Cinderella story and our Rhodopis story, okay? So this is a Venn diagram, which means on one side we have for one story for Cinderella, on the other we have for Rhodopis, for the Egyptian Cinderella, and in the middle are the things that are the same. So I'm actually gonna go over this part first. In both stories, there were mean older girls. They both had slippers or shoes of some kind. They both had a visit to the ruler. Now their visits were different because we know Cinderella, she went to the ball and Rhodopis did not. The falcon ended up giving the slipper to the pharaoh. Both of them still lose it at the party though, or it's found at the party. And then at the very end, the ruler goes and looks for a girl who can wear the slipper. So in Cinderella, we know that she has stepsisters. She gets her slippers from her fairy godmother. There's a prince. It's left at the ball, and that she goes to the ball. And then over here on Rhodopis' side, she had servant sisters. The slippers were a gift from the master, not a fairy godmother. Instead of a prince, it was a pharaoh. Her slipper was taken by the falcon, and she didn't actually go to the party. We had 4 different vocabulary words for our story that I want to point out. So the first one was dainty. And dainty means that something is small, light, and delicate. So think of a tiny flower. That would be dainty. Her master ordered a pair of dainty slippers. So dainty means small, light, and delicate. Another one was murmur. Murmur means to speak very softly, a little louder than a whisper. So I know sometimes in class, your teacher may say that you need to speak up because you're doing a murmur, like a whisper, and we can't really hear what you're saying. Okay, so she murmurs to the falcon when she meets him. Declare means that you say something very strongly. In court, a man might declare that he did not commit a crime. He is innocent. Okay, so the pharaoh in this story declared that Rhodopis was the most Egyptian of all. It means that you say something strongly. And the last one is summon. And summon means you order someone or something to come to you. So in our book, it said that the pharaoh summoned his royal barge, which was like a ship. So that means he ordered that the ship come to him. All right, whoopsies, we're gonna do this part first. So this is your grammar. This is what you're going to have for your part of your activity today that you can print out from online, or it's already in your packet. So the first one that you're going to work on will be expand. We have 2 expand. These are my favorite ones. So the first one, you're going to remember, make that sentence with more details. I always like to think of it like a balloon. You're going to blow up that balloon. Nobody wants a flat balloon, okay? So you are going to add more details to make this sentence stronger. So you shall go barefoot no longer. See what you can add to that sentence. And then see what you can add to this sentence as well. Trumpets blared and oarsmen rowed. And this time they want you to try to use the word since. So trumpets blared and oarsmen rowed since. And I know I would be thinking about why they're doing that, or maybe where they're going. That's my little hint. The next one's going to be imitate. So imitate, remember, is where we have a sentence and then we take out 1 or 2 words and we try to make a sentence that is similar. So our first sentence here is, now when Rhodopis danced, her feet sparkled like fireflies. Oh, what a very descriptive sentence. When it's written like that, it makes you put a clear, or visualize a clear picture in your mind for what exactly that looked like. Now, when you imitate this sentence, we want you to take out the noun fireflies. So your sentence should say, now when Rhodopis danced, Her feet sparkled like what? So think of something else that sparkles. And once you have that one, then you're going to change another word. Now when Rhodopis danced, her feet what? Like what? So here, instead of sparkled, you're going to need to think of a past tense verb, so an action word that means it already happened, okay? And then you're going to have to choose another noun. That's a fun one. And then the last thing that you're going to do is combine, okay? I always think this is the easiest one because all you need to do is put these 3 sentences into one sentence. I know the friends in my class were always really good at doing this. They knew that they had to get rid of 1 or 2 words. And this time they want us to add linking words, which again, we're all very good with adding linking words. Try to use the words after, then, and finally. Okay, so here are your 3 sentences and see if you can combine them using those 3 linking words. All right, so now, once you finish your grammar, the very last piece of your lesson for today would be your writing prompt. So you can just get a scrap piece of paper and write your answer down. And all it is write about some of the ways in which the 2 stories are the same and different. Use our diagram to help you remember. So you can always go back in our video so that you can look at our diagram again, because this is where all the answers are for you. And maybe you thought of some other reasons that they're the same and different too that I didn't add on this chart. Okay? Remember, take a picture once you're done and send it to your teacher. That way we know how hard you're working. Have a great day.